that regard, I would say I have more advantage over all of you, in the sense that I started my education in my language. On the colonial period, the first 2 years of my education were conducted in Mandinka. It stopped there because the school was closed. So I say I have more advantage over all of you because cognitively and psychologically I was grounded for formal education. Learning your language grounds you cognitively and psychologically, and you became apt to learn everything in the world with ease. But that colonial experimentation lasted for only 2 years, and there were only 3 schools. All of them were teaching Mandinka. One was in Faraba, one was in Bakadaji in Jimara, and one was in Bajakunda, the third one, to which I went. But they lasted for only 2 years. And the whole idea of teaching Gambian languages stopped until 1975, when UNESCO established a curriculum development center in Banjul and included national languages unit in the center. But from 75 up to 1978, the National Languages Unit of Curriculum Development Center was dormant for lack of a qualified person to lead the unit, because they needed a linguist. There was no linguist. And when I came back from France in 1978, towards the end of 78, I literally posted myself to Curriculum Development Center against the will and desire of my director of education, because he didn't want me to go there. He posted me to the president's office. I rejected to go there. I posted myself to the curriculum development, even though he said he was not going to pay me if I went there, but I went. Because one of the objectives of my university education, the field I chose, was meant to come back to the Gambia and help develop our languages, without which we cannot be anything in the world.
While he was a research fellow at the International African Institute in London. Between 1980 and 1982, he is the founder of the People's Democratic Organization for Independence and Socialism in the Gambia, that is DOI. He has also been a vocal proponent of Gambian languages used instead of English to facilitate communication, information exchange, and learning. His knowledge and first-hand experience of Gambian education is vast, and people who follow parliamentary proceedings in the past years must have heard him talking about African languages. Why shouldn't we use, in fact, our national languages at the parliament? So Uncle Seedia have been in this from the very beginning. So him and Mr. Musaba are going to talk on this very, very important topic.
Late independent of my will, but I'm here at your disposition for any length of time. We are dealing with the most important matter affecting the life of this nation. That's language. The gentleman there was saying that when he and myself were going to school, we were forbidden to speak our languages. The intention was very clear. The intention was for you to hate yourself and hate whatever belonged to you, because they wanted to make you another human being. That was the intention. But I won't go into that. I think I have to give you a brief history about teaching of Gambian languages. I hear some people say local language. There is nothing like a local language. I think we should stop saying local language. We say our language or national languages, but there is no local language. I will not go, maybe I should start from the colonial period. And in that regard, I would say I have more advantage over all of you. In the sense that I started my education in my language. On the colonial period, the first 2 years of my education were conducted in Mandinka. It stopped there because the school was closed. So I say I have more advantage over all of you because cognitively and psychologically I was grounded for formal education. Learning your language grounds you cognitively and psychologically, and you became apt to learn everything in the world with ease, with no difficulty. But that colonial experimentation lasted for only 2 years, and there were only 3 schools. All of them were teaching Mandinka. One was in Faraba, one was in Bakadaji in Jimara, and one was in Bajakunda, the third one, to which I went. But they lasted for only 2 years. And the whole idea of teaching Gambian languages stopped until 1975, when UNESCO established a curriculum development center in Banjul and included national languages unit in the center. But from 75 up to 1978, the national languages unit of curriculum development center was dormant for lack of a qualified person to lead the unit, because they needed a linguist. There was no linguist. And when I came back from France in 1978, towards the end of 78, I literally posted myself to Curriculum Development Center against the will and desire of my director of education, because he didn't want me to go there. He posted me to the president's office. I rejected to go there. I posted myself to the curriculum development, even though he said he was not going to pay me if I went there, but I went. Because one of the objectives of my university education, the field I chose, was meant to come back to the Gambia and help develop our languages, without which we cannot be anything in the world. You know what we are talking about here? We are just talking about how backward we are. That's exactly what we are talking about, how backward we still are. 60 years after our so-called independence, we are still talking about whether or not we should learn our own languages. Isn't that funny? It is very unnatural for any human being to acquire education in a foreign language. That is very unnatural. And UNESCO made a declaration to that effect in 1952, that it was the right of every child in the world to begin formal education in the mother tongue. They call it then mother tongue. And still now, after independence, we are still killing our children by forcing them to learn in a language whose culture they must know. Even the parents know nothing about English culture. Language is embedded in a culture. It is culture that nourishes language. So to know a language, you must know the culture in which it is deep-seated. That is why those kids who learn English in England, who go to English schools in England, speak English better than anybody in the Gambia. Tell me. They speak exactly like the English people. Because as kids, they were also rooted in the English culture. They grew up with it. And language learning became very fast, very easy for them. But we who struggle to learn English here, we struggle very hard. We are wonderful people, very intelligent. When I was in my sociology class in France, one of my professors told me, he said, you people learn French better than these students, the French people. Because what? Why? Because the language we write is the language of the book, not the language of the street. The students in France, the students in England, they write the language of the street. What you read in the book is what you write. And that's why your English, your French is better than their French. But that, only a big struggle gives us that. So when I came back in 1978, September, there was nobody in the curriculum development unit of the national languages. I posted myself there, and the first task was to develop a writing system for the languages. Government chose 3 languages then, Mandinka, Wolof, and Fula. But there was no writing system for them. That had to be developed, but we did so, because that is my field, that's my specialty. In a question of 2 months, we developed that. And we started developing learning materials. And this was based on the government policy itself. But when we developed our learning materials, the government refused to print them. Even though they wanted us to run an experimentation on the teaching of the 3 languages, 9 schools, 3 for each of the 3 languages. But since I was very committed to the development of our languages, we wrote all our materials handwritten. For the first year of the experimentation, handwritten materials we used. We had a class in Sukuta, a class in Falaba, and a class in Kayai, in Nyani. All of them had a class in Bichilo, a class in Panchang, another class in Banjul. And then Fula, they had a class in Chamen, a class in Fula Bantang, and the third country, the third village I've forgotten. Other problem. We had a class in Kayai. We had a class in Chamen. We had to go and see how the teachers were teaching. We had to monitor our experimentation classes. But we had no vehicle. Even though there were vehicles in the curriculum, the dialogue would rather use them than for us to go and to monitor our classes. So that we started the experiment in 1979, 1980. They were doing well. They were better than the other classes. But in 1980, I said to myself, I have to be honest to myself and to the Gambian people. Because the Gambian people thought that I was doing something serious at the curriculum development center when I was not. Not because I didn't want to, but because government didn't want me to do it. Even though the experiment was going on well. I had an appointment before I came to the Gambia in 1978, an international appointment in London, which had to do with all the languages of Africa, including Arabic. So in 1980, when I saw that they were not serious, and I wanted to make use of my education, because that's why I wanted to use my knowledge as a tool to transform the world. Knowledge is meant to be a tool to transform the world and also make you hereafter if you die. Because when you pray, you have to say something. You have to learn that. So learning is not just meant for this world, learning is meant for this world and the world hereafter. Because the world hereafter is made here, not there. And it's knowledge that makes it. من أراد الدنيا فعليه بالعلم ومن أراد الآخرة فعليه بالعلم ومن أرادهما معا فعليه بالعلم. That's the hadith. If you want this world, you have to have knowledge. If you want the world hereafter, you have to have knowledge. If you want two, you have to have knowledge. But here, we are anti-knowledge. And so that's why we are backward. So since they were not serious, I wrote back to London who wanted me to go and join the research team on African languages. I was very happy because all the languages of Africa, including Arabic, from 1980 to 1982, 3-year project. I didn't resign. I took my annual leave. I went and I never came back. And they dismissed me in my absence. But for 3 years, I did not get my dismissal letter. And they mistakenly went and paying my salary for 3 years into my account. So when I came, after my research project, I came to collect data and go back to do my doctoral thesis in France. I didn't apply for any job. I don't know how they caught wind of my arrival in the Gambia. PSC called me. First, I didn't want to go, but I went. I said, I don't know what they had to tell me. I went there. The chairman said, you are owing the Gambia government. I said, me going, what? He said, they were paying my salary. I said, that was your mistake. You dismissed me and you kept on paying my salary. That was not my fault, and any money that was paid into my account, only myself can withdraw it. So I'm not owing anybody anything. Then he said, you are the best qualified person for the job. I said, I have not applied for any job. He said, your the position you left for 3 years, we have nobody. I said, but I'm not here for that. I'm going back to do my doctorate. But then, the then vice president and all other friends of his put pressure on me, begged me to go back to curriculum development. I went there again. That was 1982. So, but it was even worse than before. So I was there 82, 83. 83, okay, I asked them to give me study leave without salary. To go and do my job, they did. I went. And then the center became dormant, the unit became dormant again. 85, I came back. And I went back there again. But this time I was very decisive. I saw that the government didn't want to implement their own policy. And I didn't want them to waste my time. So that in 1986, I resigned. And that is when I joined hands with my colleagues to form a party. Because we saw that to change the country, you cannot be in an office to change it. You have to have a political party. But our mission was to sensitize people to understand what politics itself is about. That's why people started saying that we didn't want position, we came to educate people. How can you work with people without them understanding what they are about? People didn't know why they are voting. They still don't know why they are voting for people. They vote for you because they like you, because you are a handsome man, because you are a relative, because you are a friend. Is that what politics is about? And that's why we are backward. But then let me come to the issue itself. So that experiment it failed in 1980. And it never came up again until about 2000. The government started again the teaching of national languages. And they developed the current CRED. Developed materials. I was part of them, I helped. I was a consultant. But you see, national language teaching is a very heavy job. Because why? We who have acquired our education in English and French and Spanish and all these foreign languages, it is by virtue of our knowledge of English that gives us possibility to have employment, to become a permanent secretary, a minister, a member of parliament, even a council. It is stipulated by law that you have to be able to speak, you have to be competent in English. In fact, before you were selected as a candidate, you had to go through what they call linguistic test. That stopped, but it was, when I started, I went for it. But now there is no more linguistic test for members of parliament. So you wouldn't know who can speak English, who cannot speak English, who can read English, who cannot read English. So that's why things are as they are now in the National Assembly, because there is no more test for language. And English remains the official language of the National Assembly. So, when I went to London, I was there for 3 years. And I said all the African languages. The project had 3 aspects. One, a writing system for all the languages of Africa, including Arabic. 2, an inventory of all the languages of Africa and their dialects. 3, a language map of Africa. These were the 3 aspects of the research project from 1980 to 1982. My responsibility on the project had to do with a writing system for all the languages of Africa, including Arabic. But with the help of UNESCO in 1978, at a meeting of experts in Niamey, a writing system for all the languages of Africa was designed called Africa Reference Alphabet. And that's what all the languages in Africa, all the countries in Africa should use to write their languages. That is in use here in the Gambia and many other countries. But again, I say language is a very political issue in Africa. Intellectuals hide behind so-called multiplicity of languages in Africa and say, you don't need to teach our languages. When I started the project in the Gambia here, I was fighting. Some people were even wanting to fight me physically. Why should my child learn Mandinka? My child is already speaking Mandinka. Why should my child learn Wolof? He or she is already speaking Wolof. And they don't understand that speaking a language is not enough, but you use the same language to record. You see the same language to learn, to teach. Some of the meetings, I remember somebody came there with a gown all filled with juju for Seedia, against Seedia. I said, these jujus will never work because I'm for the truth. And God is for the truth. So God is with me. So you cannot do anything to me. And they have not done anything to me. So my struggle for the teaching of national language started since then. And it continues up till now. And as long as I breathe the free air of Allah, I will fight for the teaching of this language, for the establishment of the language as languages of instruction and even as official languages. That is what is natural to us. That is what makes us who we are. Language is fundamental to the identity of the being and being of a human person. You see all the failures in our examinations, the trick, what people don't understand is the trick is that the children are not grounded cognitively. You start going to go to ECD now, 3 years old, you are English. The father and mother know nothing about English culture, and a child at 3 is learning English. To the detriment of the child himself or herself. This is the tragedy of our situation. Now the new policy. It is not because there were no other policies. There were policies. They were working on other policies. There were experiments. They all collapsed because they were not properly started. So the current policy, and one of the drafters of the policy, it is called Language in Education Policy. And the idea still is to help children to learn English better. I want you to understand this. We are not teaching our languages because we love them, because we want them to develop. No, we want to use them as tools to help children to learn better. Because that is what the science has proven. That if a child begins learning in the mother tongue, he or she does better in everything than the child who does it in another language. That's why we are still working on teaching children their mother tongue from ECD this time. This policy, there was a big fight. I fought with their consultants. But they wanted, and it's not what is in the interest of developing our languages. I fought against it, and I'm happy that at least I have succeeded partly. Because they wanted us to start teaching English and our languages from grade 1. Like if you are building a house, I think the first thing you do is to build a foundation. When that is solid, then you start building the walls. But here, the method they want us to use is foundation and the wall to be built concurrently. You need ever stand. That's why all the other experiments collapsed. So I fought to say at least children must learn in their languages from ECD to grade 4 when they will transit to learning English as language of instruction. That's what the new policy is about. They learn from ECD, they learn only in the national languages. And from grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, national languages will be the media of instruction for all the subjects. Then in grade 4, towards the end of grade 3, they'll begin to learn English as a subject. Then in grade 4, they will transit using English as medium of instruction. But national languages will continue to be taught. And children will have a choice to choose whichever national language they want to learn in addition to their mother tongue. But you see, now we don't say mother tongue because it does not coincide with the reality. My mother is Fula. So if you say my mother tongue, I never learned my mother tongue because my mother married in a Mandinka dominated community. So to cover there is no Fula there. They are all Mandinka. And it's the biggest village, one of the biggest villages in Wuli East, in addition to Bajakunda. So my mother never, sometimes when I wanted to be funny with her, I spoke Fula because there were Fulas in my compound. My father had a lot of cows because the shepherds were always Fula. And my mother was also Fula. So I learned to speak Fula. And then when I was going to school in Basse, I was brought up by Fula speaking people. Basse Mansajankunda Fula speaking. So I knew how to speak Fula. Different types of Fula, in fact, they are completely mixed up in my head. Tukulor there, Habobo there, Pulofuto there. They are all dialects of Fula. So I can speak all this. Now before in 1978, 79 was 3 languages, now 7 languages. Manjako is the 7th one, and Shere. He spoke about language mapping. The essence of language mapping was to determine the importance of each language nationwide. which language is dominant in a particular community. It was meant to find that out because schools are established in communities where these languages are spoken. If you go to, for example, if you want to teach Sarahule in the Gambia, the only place, with the exception of Jalambere and Medina, in Jara East and Jara West, there is no Sarahule village anywhere in the Gambia but only in URR. So if you want to teach Sarahule, naturally you will have to go to URR to teach it. And not everywhere in URR, but their communities are that way. That's why you will go and teach Sarahule. And if you want to teach Serer, for example, you have to cross the river, go to North Bank. There is a small group there, they speak Serer. If you want to teach Manjak, you have to go to Combo South, because Manjak is a small community, linguistic group in the Gambia, but Combo South predominantly. So instead of saying mother tongue is mother tongue, we say L1. L1 means language one of the child. If you go to Banjul, you go to Tobacco Road, which is dominantly Mandinka speaking. I was teaching in Kampama school. Most of the children from Kampama speak Wolof, not Mandinka. But the parents are Mandinka. Somebody was talking about mother not speaking the language of the child. So children in that community in Banjul, most of them speak Mandinka, Wolof as their L1. So now you use L1 instead of mother tongue, because when you refer mother tongue to me, it's not correct. But my L1 is Mandinka. And many people among us here, our L1 is not necessarily our natural language, our mother's language or father's language. So the language mapping was meant to determine that. And that is why in some schools you will have a major language and a minor language. I think he indicated that in his presentation. But there are some schools that only one dominant language, which is going to be taught as medium of instruction. But in a place where you have a major one and a minor one, both of them will be used as medium of instruction. But many people may be thinking that in Fonyi, Jola is automatically the language of everybody. Yes and no. If you go to Mayok, Fula is the dominant language there. And Mayok is in the heart of Fonyi. And there are dwellers in Mayok. But the language that the community speak more is Fula. So if you want to teach Gambian language in Mayok, you have to go, because both the community and the children in the schools, the common language is Fula. That doesn't mean that Jola is not spoken there, but it's a minor language. And then where there is a minor language, major language prevails. And then of course your multilingualism comes to play here when you are teaching. So that was the essence of the language mapping. Now the policy, as I said, is a huge task. But I don't think the government is very convinced that they have a monumental task of preparation to do for the implementation of this current policy. We have 7 good languages which are going to be taught from ECD 1 to ECD 3, from grade 1 all throughout the school system, up to university. You don't need just teachers. No, the teachers which are being produced by the college now, no, those ones cannot teach these languages. Because one, There are two types of training to be done. I always tell them, I always emphasize them. A teacher to become apt to teach fuller has to learn how to read and write, has to know the structure of fuller, must become capable of teaching the grammar of fuller, must know the fuller system linguistically clearly. Every speaker of a language, two things. You must have competence and you must have performance. But most of us in this room here, we have competence, we have performance in speaking our languages. I emphasize, I'm using two terms, performance and competence. Technically in linguistics, there are two different things. I say in this room, all of you have performance in speaking your languages, but you don't have competence. You ask me why, I'll tell you. Competence means that you know, you have a knowledge of the structure of the language you are speaking. You know its phonetics, you know its phonology, you know its syntax, you know its semantics. That's competence. We are natural speakers of our language without the knowledge of their structures. And that is why if I give a pencil to somebody who has never written Wolof, I say write me a sentence, the whole sentence will be one word. Because segmentation, he or she doesn't know. Words, he doesn't know. Phonemes, he doesn't know. So that's why when you give somebody a pen and say write something in your language, and one day first they know what alphabet am I? The alphabet they know is the English alphabet. He's going to write it exactly the same thing as the Tubabs wrote our languages. The best way they know. And even that's why even the way people write their surnames in this country and their names, according to our writing system, is wrong. Absolutely wrong. Because if you write your name with camera now, you say camera, you say C, that means totally something in our writing. C means ch. So if you write camera, it means camera. So it is wrong. So it means that. And when he say, my friend there is going to write his book in Pula or Mandinka, I say, hey, my friend has to learn those languages first. You see, the Ngugi you talk about, Ngugi when he went to school, he learned Kikuyu. I went to Kenya in 1979. I went to Seedia schools in Kuwis district, Kiambu district, where Kikuyu is spoken. The teachers could not speak English, they spoke only Kikuyu. And they were teaching Kikuyu. So Ngugi learned how to read and write in Kikuyu. He learned how to read and write in Swahili. So that's why he was writing fluently in those languages. I know him personally. We worked in London together from 1980 to 1982. When he was bound to go back to Kenya, we formed an association called Committee for the Release of Political Prisoners in Kenya. So I know him personally. So the language policy, this is precisely what it is. Now they are preparing to implement it. They are producing the material like he said. ECD1 is because I edited ECD1, ECD2 books, I edited them. And then I'm sure they have added ECD3 there now. And then you have grade 1, grade 2, I edited that also. I'm sure they are now working on grade 3 and grade 4 and so on. So that's the preparation that is ongoing now. And I'm told, I'm not convinced, that they are also training their teachers. He is talking about 4,000, can you imagine? 4,000 teachers. 4,000 Gambian teachers who have never learned to read and write in their languages. Most of them, 98% of them never learned how to read and write in their languages. And you expect them to teach their languages adequately and successfully? Impossible. We have to train them first to read and write in those languages, and then train them how to teach in those languages. Two trainings. And as far as I know, if there is training, there's only one seemingly training, that is teaching them how to teach. But how to teach, you are being trained to teach what you don't know. Can you do that? Tell me. They are being trained to go and teach Fuller, and they don't know how to read and write in Fuller. They don't even know the Fuller writing system. How are they going to teach? So that's the big challenge. The lady said something, the young girl said something, the challenges in the classroom, even with bilingual education. You know, I was tickled, I was smiling, and when he said certain things, they made me laugh. Because the problem is not as simple as we are making it. Even bilingual education is complex. It's not easy. You see why? Just one little thing I'll tell you. I talk about performance and competence. Okay, I'm teaching Mandinka. I'm performing well. But competent wise, I don't know Mandinka. But competent wise, I know English. Performance wise, I know English. But competence wise, I don't know Mandinka. But performance wise, I know it. And then when I use Mandinka in that context, I'm just using it as a means to help the child to understand what I said in English. But I'm not in any way helping that child to become expressive in Mandinka as he or she is in English. This is the critical thing you are missing. Yes, bilingual education is good. And pedagogically, it has always, somebody said it here. You say that it is not new. Yeah, it is not new. I'm telling you, doctor, bilingual education is not new here. When I went to school, whenever a teacher had problem, he always resorted to the language of the child to explain, to understand. That's the essence of it. That is not new. And the Arabic teacher also said it is correct. We have always resorted to our languages to make children understand what we said in Portuguese, in French, and English. But we want to formalize that now. We want to inject it as a teaching method. That's what we are about. I agree. But it is complex. And I'll discuss with you. Thank you very much. Just one little thing. He mentioned it. You see, people always say, how can we have Wolof as our official language? How can we have Fula as our official language? I was doing a geography of Wolof, Fula in Africa, geography of Fula, to say where is Fula spoken. Fula is one of the most widely spoken languages in our sub-region. There are 22 countries here where there is Fula. The last one is in Central African Republic. Central African Republic, there is Fula there. So what is the problem do we have for having an African language as even a continental language? We can have as many as 4. Do you know how many languages are official in Switzerland? 4. One of them is almost a dead language, Romance. And to Switzerland, there are about, I was counting in Eastern Europe and Western Europe, there are so many countries where there are 4 languages as official, 3 languages, the minimum is 3 languages. They are working. So you think that if you have many languages here in Gambia as official language, we will not work. We will. Switzerland is working. Luxembourg also 3 official languages. They are working. But it is because our mindset. And that's why everybody should read in Buddhist book, Decolonizing the Mind. Everybody should read that because everything is there. In Ethiopia, Ethiopia is one of the languages which has never been colonized. Amharic is the language of Amharas. But Amharas are not the dominant ethnic group in Ethiopia. But historically, all the kings in Ethiopia were Amharas. Menelik I, Menelik II, all of them were Emperor Haile Selassie. They were all Amharas. So Amharic was connected with political power, was also the language of religion. The Coptic Church in Ethiopia is also the language of the church. So these two forces made it the most important language in Ethiopia historically. But now it has changed because Oromo are maybe demographically more than the Amharas. And Tigrinyas are also more demographically than the Amharas. So now if you go to Oromo land, they have their own language. The TV is in Oromo. All the schools are teaching Oromo. If you go to Tigrinya, the same thing is happening there. The latest in Africa, Rwanda, they had French as official language. They changed from French to English. And now, 2 years ago, they decided to adopt Swahili as their official language and language of everything. Why? Because the major language in Rwanda, Tigrinya, is almost the same dialect as Swahili. And Swahili historically has been written since colonial times. So the Rwandans, just simply, before we order ourselves, we already have a written language, which is the same as ours. Let's adopt that. They have adopted Swahili. But there is also a project with Akalang. Akalang is the language center AU has created in Bamako. It has been there for a long time. Akala means Academy of African Languages. I was one of the academicians there. So they are dealing with all the languages in Africa, particularly those we call cross-border languages. Cross-border languages means languages which are spoken in more than one country. For example, if we take Sahule in Gambia. Sahule is spoken in Gambia, Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau. So it's a cross-border language. If you take Mandinka, the same. If you take Fulfulde, the same. If you take Wolof, it's Gambia and Senegal. So Africa is not short of languages that they can use continentally. We can choose a regional language, Fulfulde. West Africa, we can. Or if you don't want to choose Fulfulde, we can choose one version of Mandinka. And then you can take South Swahili, continental also, but that's what Akalang is promoting. Akalang wants us, and then again, they make me laugh. They want us all to adopt Swahili as the African language. But how can that be? How can you just jump into things like this? Because people who are trying to promote this have no idea about language. They are just technocrats, and they just sit in their offices and invent anything they think is workable when it is not workable. Yes, Swahili can become a regional language, but there can be other regional language like Hausa, Fulfulde. Fulfulde is the term we use to cover all the dialects of Fula. So this is the situation in Africa. The multiplicity of languages, like somebody said, is not a cost. I think Seka said so. Michael Seka said, many languages is not a cost. In fact, it is an enrichment. The big intellectual in Senegal, the late Sir Anta Diop, spent all his life to prove to the world, and he did so successfully, that African languages are not inferior to any language. In fact, language started in Africa. But I won't go into that. But language, human language, started here. And writing, human writing in our continent started in Africa. Anybody who is interested to know that, come and see me in my office. Thank you very much. They who decide how we go about what we are doing. All that is not in our interest. You see? So, but I agree 100%, but I know we can budget for it. We can really run our program depending on ourselves if you know our priorities. I know where to get money. If you allow me to, if government gives me, say, okay, look at amounts and see, get money, I'll make billions. Because monies are just being spent frivolously and no development is taking place. But I know one day it will come. Now, but one thing, let's be very careful. You can never, in a multilingual situation, you can never make a choice and say, this is what is going to happen. If it does, you'll have a crisis. You see, last year, CRED was attacked by, let's say, Mandinka speakers. Because effective intervention, they are running a program with this out of school. They found that it was the method they are using is very effective. So they ask CRED, I'm telling you what they say, whether it is true or not, but I'm not speaking for them. I'm saying what they say. They wanted to use Wolof. They want to experiment with Wolof. And they allow them to do it. So those in the country didn't understand what was happening. They thought the language in education policy is what is being implemented, and they started with Wolof. So everybody started attacking, even me, they were calling me, you are there, but I just kept quiet. Because the policy is there. I know that it was not the policy in implementation, it's effective intervention that was using Wolof. Not the expense of the Gambia government, not the expense of the coffers of this country, but they are using it to experiment with it. But people didn't understand, they started attacking. So we cannot sit down and say, yeah, if you do that, we'll kill each other in this country. People will not accept it. People have tried it, never worked. So, but eventually, languages will impose themselves. Go to Senegal. Nobody has decided that Wolof should be the language everybody is speaking. But everybody is speaking. If you go to Senegal, you have to speak Wolof or French. And some other situations are like, we are unfortunate that we don't have a dominant language which is spoken almost by everybody, like in Somalia. Somali is spoken by 98% of the population. But there are about 120 languages in Somalia. But the whole population, 98% speak Somali. So everybody accept that the Somali becomes the national language. So from 1974, 75, Somali is the language of instruction from ECD to university, is the official language. But before that, they had three official languages: Italian, English, and Arabic. Before the coup d'etat, Siad Barre's coup d'etat in 1969, they had three official languages, but now they have only one, that is Somali. But they are lucky that 98% of everybody recognizes himself as self. Like if you want to choose Swahili now, let me tell you another problem. Where there is a major language, it is difficult to make such a choice. Swahili is spoken almost by everybody in Kenya. Jomo Kenyatta wanted it to be the language of the parliament. But his own language, Kikuyu, is one of the major languages. Ngugi's language is one of the major languages in Kenya. And because that is a major language, it is difficult for Swahili to automatically become the major language for everybody. But there are so many languages here, hundreds of languages there. But the major ones are Kikuyu and Luhia. Even though they speak Swahili, but still, Swahili is not the language of administration in Kenya. Even in Tanzania, it is two of the official languages. It is one, English is second. Even in Tanzania, Swahili is one, English is second. So it is, we leave languages as they are, they'll fight among themselves, eventually one will prevail.